I'm Dave. So I actually have 3 titles, and I'll just run through them quickly. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Acquisitions at the Technology Transformation Service. I'm also the Deputy Commissioner acting for the Technology Transformation Service and the Acting Executive Director for 18F, all of which was in part of GSA. I'm putting all that aside. I do procurement and now 18F stuff at GSA. I wanted to talk a little bit about what my focus on acquisition is, and what I will say may be a little bit surprising. The mission, it's in our position descriptions, it's our performance plans, is to make procurement joyful. And what we mean by that is we want the people who are working as 1102s and working in the acquisition office to love their jobs. We want our customers to be delighted when they work with our contracting office. And we want the industry who's working with government to be extremely excited about working with government, not just because there's money at the end of the line, but also because it's a fantastic experience to work with government. So fundamentally, that's the problem and the opportunity that we're trying to solve. How do we make procurement joyful? It turns out this is actually something that happens in the private sector and in your own lives. You shop, right? You know what you're trying to buy and you like it. If you had to buy everything and it was as difficult as buying a house, you would hate buying anything. But in procurement, that's life. It's hard to buy stuff, even really simple stuff. So we started thinking about this problem and we're like, well, how can we buy things more thoughtfully? How can we make it more fun? How can we make it more sort of normal and not insanely risk averse and insanely difficult to just buy a really basic thing that right now I know I could go as a private citizen and pay on my credit card to get this same thing that takes a contracting officer and legal and solicitation with 3 or more bids and all that sort of stuff. I just want to go buy it. I can just do that, right? Oh, and then I have to go get it ATO'd and I have to get FSMA and all that stuff and I have to go talk to legal and deal with terms of service. Like, this is really, really hard. How can we make it easy? And fundamentally what we realize is what a lot of the folks have already talked about, which is that you can together. And not like an IPT where it's like 40 or 50 people, but a small 3-person team. Every contract has a product lead, a contracting officer, and a technical lead working together. That's your team. And our Office of Acquisition has about 30 people. Only a third of them, actually less than a third of them, are contracting officers. The rest are either product managers or technical leads or design leads or folks who don't think about procurement before they come into the government and understand how to either champion for their customers and build great product, or they understand the technology that ultimately we're buying. And what that allowed us to do is to rethink the acquisition process, not as a sort of thing where you have to go buy the book and sort of read all of the provisions of the FAR and figure out how you're supposed to fit whatever this program office, which doesn't understand what you're doing, and throwing it over the wall to you, and you're then going to throw it over to the wall to industry. We said, forget all that. We just want to have a conversation, which it turns out is actually something that you do in software, which is if you practice agile software development, it's all about conversations and collaboration over formal requirements. Well, okay, so how do we fit that in? Well, good thing USDS already came up with the TechFAR handbook, so the TechFAR, the Digital Services Playbook. So we're like, all right, cool, that's good. We can operate within the FAR, we can operate within Part 8 and Part 12 and 13 of the FAR, and we can get stuff done. And now we have to think about how we can buy things well. Well, as it turns out, actually, Dan, I think, came up with he wrote this thing about Death Stars and droids and all that, and we're like, this actually makes a lot of sense in my practice as a software engineer. Whereas, like, when I build a thing, I don't build it all myself. I go borrow some other library and I buy some other package that someone's already built. So, as a person who writes code, and I think about how I write my code by borrowing libraries and packages and modules from other people, it turns out, hey, Part 39 of the FAR and Klinger-Cohen already says that you're supposed to use modular contracting. Well, that's interesting. So what if I decide that I can actually take, contracts, not as sort of monolithic, massive contracts, and I try to buy it all at once, which is really frustrating, which would be insane as an engineer to build it that way. But instead say, I know that I need this thing, and I know that I need that thing, and I know that I need that thing, and let me just buy them separately and put them all together and sort of piece it, make it work. And so fundamentally decided, all right, we're going to, we're going to take the idea of agile software development, neat. We're going to take the idea of modular contracting, neat. We're also going to take the idea of user-centered design. What's that? We said, well, how do we know what we need to buy? Right? This is the fundamental. When you step back and you think about what the biggest problem in acquisitions is, requirements gathering. You have to figure out what you're trying to buy. Well, it turns out it's hard. It's a really hard thing, and usually you don't know ex ante what you need at the end. Right? You sort of say, well, I know that I have this general sense of what I need, but I don't actually have a really clear sense of what it's going to look like at the very end. Well, it turns out user-centered design is a really thoughtful way of getting from here to there in an iterative way where you're actually validating your requirements over and over and over again. So, okay, cool. Agile, modular, user-centered design. There's one last piece, which is openness. So we decided that we were going to work in the open from day one. And this is actually a principle that did not come out of the acquisition context, but instead came out of the 18F culture, which is that we have, at the 18F side of the house, we have an expectation that all of our code is open from day one. Our project management is open from day one, that the work that we do is public in the public domain, and therefore something that is available to the public. We decided to take that ethic and bring that into the acquisition space and say all of our work is going to be done in the open to the greatest extent possible as well. And that means that our prices are now public, our solicitations are now public, our expectations with our industry partners is now public, and expectations with agency partners are now public. But it also provides a great accountability for us and for our industry partners to know that the work that they're doing is going to be evaluated not based on sort of, their sheets, but instead on their code, and our work is going to be evaluated not based on our slick materials as for agencies, but in fact our ability to deliver high quality functioning software for them. So great. User-centered design, agile, open, modular contracting. There's the last piece, which is the most surprising piece of all of this, is that we didn't know any of this when we started. When we actually sat down to come up with how we were going to make procurement joyful, we had no idea what this was going to look like. Instead, we decided to take an explicitly incremental approach and to say, we're going to fail a lot. In fact, the very first major press piece about any of the stuff that I was doing at 18F was by Jason Miller, and the headline said, GSA says Agile BPA might be a failure. And I had to walk up onto the 6th floor, which is the, where the administrator sits on GSA, and they're like, so this headline says it could be a failure. And I was like, yep, that's a direct quote. And I didn't get fired. And then we had a project called the Micro-Purchase Platform where we said we're going to buy code for under $3,500 with a P card. And the blog post that announced this thing said this might be a terrible idea. And I didn't get fired. And what it created was a sense that we could actually be experimental. We could be iterative. We could be explicitly able to fail in a way that would let us learn lessons and do it better. And boy, did we fail. The Agile BPA got protested for 6 months. Whoa, that's crazy. We made it through all of those protests. But we also were able to learn a lot through that process. The Micro-Purchase Platform, our first pie was for $1. That pissed everybody off, right? But we learned from that experience, and we got better and better and better each time. And so the thing that I'll leave for you all is that the way that we approach acquisitions is to say, we want to have the users involved early and often. We want to make sure that we're buying the right thing at the right time. We want to make sure that it's a fun, enjoyable process throughout, and then we're going to learn throughout that entire process. And then, at the back end, we want to share that out. So thank you very much.